There is a particular quality to the silence of a luxury hotel at 2 a.m. that has nothing to do with quiet. The Meridian Grand on West 58th Street never actually stopped. The kitchens ran, the laundry ran. The HVAC breathed through every corridor in a low, mechanical hum that you stopped hearing after about 6 months, the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat. The elevators moved. The security cameras blinked their slow red blinks. The lobby downstairs gleamed under its permanent amber light, waiting for someone to walk through the doors, available at all hours to anyone with the right credit card and the right kind of need. Marcus Cole had worked the overnight room service shift at the Meridian for 3 years, 4 months, and 11 days. He knew the building the way a man knows a place when he has walked its corridors in darkness more times than he has walked them in daylight. He knew which elevator was slowest, the one nearest the service entrance, the one that hesitated half a second before the doors committed. He knew which hallway carpets held the faint smell of a flooding incident 2 winters back, inadequately remediated. He knew which guests tipped and which didn't, which ones called down at 2 a.m. because they were hungry, and which ones called because they were lonely, and a club sandwich was the closest thing to company they could arrange without embarrassment. He was good at his job. He'd never needed anyone to tell him that to know it was true. He was 41 years old, and he had the face of a man who had made peace with a great deal. I ain't not resigned. That was different. Peace was something you arrived at deliberately. He had a daughter named Rosie who was 7 years old and who slept right now in the apartment on East 119th Street in the care of Mrs. Delgado from next door, who was 73 and had been minding Rosie on Marcus's overnight shifts since Rosie was 4. The arrangement had begun as a temporary thing. Most permanent things begin that way. Rosie's mother, Denise, had left when Rosie was 2. Not dramatically. That was the part that had taken Marcus the longest to come to terms with, not because cruelty would have been better, but because it left no clear place to put the anger. Denise had simply decided that the life she had was not the life she wanted, and she had gone to find the other one. She sent cards on Rosie's birthday and at Christmas, or Rosie kept them in a shoebox under her bed. Marcus had never said a negative word about those cards in Rosie's presence, and he never would. What he had done instead was learn to make a life from the materials available. He packed Rosie's lunchbox the night before, so mornings didn't carry extra pressure. He put her drawings on the refrigerator with the good magnets, not the cheap ones that let things fall. He read to her every night he was home, and on the nights he wasn't, he recorded himself reading the next chapter so she could listen before she slept. He taught her to make scrambled eggs, because he believed in the dignity of knowing how to feed yourself. He told her she was brave. He told her the truth when she asked hard questions, shaped to the size of what she could hold. And he was the kind of father who holds something together so steadily and for so long that people forget it was ever at risk of falling. Tonight, his cart held a BLT on sourdough, a bottle of sparkling water, and a dish of warm chocolate chip cookies that had been requested by the guest in room 1408. Except that the request, when Marcus had received it through the system at 1:47 a.m., had come in as a modification to an existing order. Someone had called down for the cookies alone, and the BLT had been added by the original booking, placed when the room was checked in under the name V. Laurent. The note in the system said dietary preferences, standard. Additional security instructions, none. Which was the kind of detail that told Marcus nothing useful about who was actually in the room. He'd worked enough late shifts to know that the people who booked rooms under names that didn't match their credit card signatures were usually one of 3 things: people having affairs, people in the middle of a crisis, or people with enough money and enough public profile that the pseudonym was simply habit, the way celebrities wear hats in airports. The Meridian catered to all 3. Marcus didn't judge any of them. He delivered the food, he took the cart back, he went about his night. The 14th floor was quiet in the way the 14th floor was always quiet. Carpeted silence, the hum of the HVAC, the faint sound from one room of a television running without anyone watching. Marcus wheeled his cart to the end of the east corridor, checked the number, and then knocked twice with the measured knock he'd developed over years. Not aggressive, not tentative. Present. He waited. The pause before the door opened was longer than usual. Long enough that Marcus was about to knock again when he heard the bolt slide. The woman who opened the door was wearing a hotel bathrobe and had dark hair and the specific kind of face that does not give things away easily. She was perhaps 35. Her eyes moved past Marcus before they landed on him, a quick survey of the corridor both ways, and then she stepped back to let him in. Marcus read the look automatically, without thinking about it. It was a look he'd seen in the military years ago, the particular alertness of someone running a continuous assessment of their environment. You didn't develop that look from nothing. You developed it because at some point the environment had given you a reason to. He brought the card inside without comment. The room was one of the premier suites on the east side, which meant it had a sitting area and a view of the park and a minibar that cost more per bottle than Marcus made in an hour. There was a laptop open on the desk, but the screen had been turned to face the wall. There were no bags visible, which meant they were in the closet or hadn't come up yet. There was no coat. The room had the slightly stripped quality of a space a person had arranged deliberately not to look lived in. Marcus set up the tray on the coffee table. The woman was standing near the window, not looking out of it, which was the detail that placed a small, quiet flag somewhere in the back of his awareness. The park view at night was genuinely beautiful. People who didn't look at it when they were standing in front of it were usually thinking about something more pressing. "The cookies are from tonight's batch," Marcus said. "They're better warm." She looked at him. A brief recalibration, as if she'd forgotten he was still there. "Thank you," she said. Her accent was faint and difficult to place. Her voice was controlled in the way voices are controlled when their owner is monitoring everything they say. Marcus nodded. He was about to leave when he noticed the phone on the table beside the laptop. Her phone, face down, and beside it a hotel keycard and a room service menu that had been moved, he thought, since he walked in. Not dramatically, just slightly. As if she'd set it down in a different position when she got up to answer the door. But he noticed these things. He didn't always know what to do with them. What Marcus Cole had done for 4 years before he was Marcus Cole from East 119th Street, Marcus Cole, who worked overnight room service, was intelligence work. 11 years in the Army, the last 4 of them in roles that did not appear in detail on any standard resume. He'd come out at 30 and spent the intervening years learning how to be a regular person, which had turned out to be harder and more meaningful work than anything he'd done before it. He was good at both. He had simply chosen which one would define him. He was almost at the door when he saw it. The phone on the table beside the laptop was not her phone. The phone was facing up, not down, and it had a small cracked screen at the corner that had been repaired with clear tape. It was a cheap burner. And on its screen, visible from where Marcus stood for just a moment before it went dark, was a text message from a contact labeled simply, H. The message read, "Floor 14 confirmed. 2 hours." Marcus kept walking. He reached the door, put his hand on the handle, and opened it. He paused in the doorway. Not for long, just the length of a breath. "Ma'am," he said without turning around. "I'm Marcus. I'm on until 6. If you need anything at all, you can request through the system or ask for me by name at the desk." He paused. "Either way, someone will know to check on you." He said it the way a man says the thing he needs to say without explaining why he's saying it. There was a silence behind him. Then, "All right." He closed the door softly and stood for a moment in the empty corridor, listening to the hum of the building. And down the hall, the service elevator made its slow, deliberate sound. 2 hours. The text had been sent, he estimated, about 40 minutes ago, which meant that whoever had sent it, whoever H was, whoever had been given the floor number of a woman staying under a false name in a hotel where security instructions had been filed as none, had just over an hour left in their window. Marcus Cole took his cart back to the service corridor. He put it away in its place. He washed his hands at the small sink beside the freight elevator. He thought about Rosie asleep in the apartment on East 119th. He thought about Mrs. Delgado, who was 73, and who would call him if anything was wrong, the same way she always did. He thought about the woman in room 1408, then with her controlled voice and her laptop turned to face the wall in the particular way she'd checked the corridor before she'd let him in. Then he picked up the phone at the service station and called the overnight security desk. "Hey," he said when it picked up. "This is Marcus Cole on 14. I need to flag something. You got a minute?" If this story is already pulling at something in you, hit the like button and subscribe to Quiet Kind. And drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from. He was just a room service guy. No one saw him coming. Keep watching. The man on security that night was a 23-year-old named Darnell Briggs who had been in the role for 6 weeks and who was. Marcus had assessed over 3 months of late-night corridor crossings, conscientious and not yet jaded. Both qualities mattered. "I don't have details," Marcus told him. "I have a read on a situation. It might be nothing. But if it's not nothing, you'll want to know now and not later." Darnell had listened. He had not dismissed it. He had said he'd noted and run a check on the booking. "And check who's been asking the desk about that floor," Marcus said. "In the last couple of hours. In person or by phone?" Another pause. "You military?" Darnell asked. "I was," Marcus said. "A long time ago." He hung up and stood for a moment at the service station window, which looked out over nothing. A light well, a concrete wall, the geometry of the building's interior. Somewhere on the 14th floor, so a woman who had checked in under a false name and requested chocolate chip cookies at 1:47 in the morning was sitting in a room with a laptop turned to face the wall, waiting out something she had not asked for help with. Marcus Cole did not go back to the room. That was not his job, and the situation was in the right hands now, or as right as the hands available. What he did was stay on the floor. He made himself a reason to be in the 14th floor corridor. An ice bucket delivery to 1412 that had come through the system 20 minutes earlier and been deprioritized. He moved the cart. He moved slowly. He kept the corridor in his peripheral range. He had learned, a long time ago, that sometimes the most useful thing a person can do is simply not leave. The man who arrived 40 minutes later took the elevator to 14. Marcus saw him from the end of the corridor. Late 30s, expensive coat, moving with the purpose of someone who knows exactly where he's going. Not a guest. The way he walked was the walk of a man who had been given an address and was closing the distance to it. He didn't look at the room numbers the way guests do. He already knew the number. Marcus stepped into the corridor. "Sir," he said, pleasant, unhurried. "Can I help you find something?" The man stopped, assessed Marcus in a single sweep, the uniform, the cart, the easy stance, and reached the wrong conclusion about what he was dealing with. "I'm visiting a friend," he said. "Of course," Marcus said. "If you let me know the room number, I can let them know you're here. We like to give our guests a heads up when they have visitors at this hour." He smiled. "Oh, house policy." The man's expression shifted. Just slightly. Not the expression of someone who'd been caught. More the expression of someone who had underestimated an obstacle and was recalculating. "That won't be necessary," he said. "It's really no trouble," Marcus said. He had not moved from the center of the corridor. He had not raised his voice. He was holding a hotel notepad and a pen, poised with professional readiness, and he was simply there, in the way that a person can be simply there in a way that makes it very inconvenient to go around them. Down the hall, the elevator doors opened. Darnell Briggs walked out of it with the overnight manager, a woman named Patricia Chen, who had been in hotel management for 19 years and who could read a situation from 20 feet out. She read this one in approximately 4 seconds. And the man in the expensive coat looked at the 2 approaching staff members, at Marcus Cole and his notepad, at the corridor that had somehow become occupied, and made the calculation. He left. He took the elevator down and he left, and Marcus watched the indicator light descend. 14, 13, 12. And then he set his notepad down on the cart and exhaled. Patricia Chen stopped beside him. She looked at the indicator light, then at Marcus. "You want to tell me what just happened?" she said. "Man visiting a guest," Marcus said, "at 2:30 in the morning, without the guest expecting him." Patricia looked at the door of room 1408. "The Laurent booking." "The Laurent booking," Marcus confirmed. She was quiet for a moment. "How did you know?" Marcus thought about the cracked phone, the text message, and the way the woman had looked at the corridor before she opened the door. "Just a read," he said. Patricia nodded slowly. She had the manner of someone storing something away for later examination. "I'll call for a police welfare check. We'll move her room if she wants." "She'll want," Marcus said. He was right. They moved her to room 2201 at 3 in the morning. Patricia Chen handled it with the particular efficiency of someone who has navigated sensitive situations often enough that sensitivity has become procedural. A different floor. A room not connected to the original booking. New keycard, new name in the system. M. Okafor, which had been Patricia's choice, methodical and untraceable. 2 security staff positioned at either end of the 22nd floor corridor for the remainder of the night. A precaution Patricia authorized without being asked. Marcus helped with the cart. There wasn't much to move. A single carry-on bag. The laptop in its sleeve. A small leather document case that the woman, V. Laurent M. Okafor, whoever she actually was, carried herself and did not set down even while they waited for the elevator. Marcus noticed this the way he noticed everything, without comment. In the elevator, she looked at him. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "No," he agreed. "You could have just called security and gone back to your shift." "I could have," Marcus said. The elevator moved. She looked at the doors. "Why didn't you?" Marcus thought about it the way he thought about things that deserved a real answer. "Not quickly." "Because the situation wasn't resolved," he said. "And I was there." She didn't respond to that. But something in her shoulders settled. Very slightly, the way a person settles when they've been given an answer they weren't expecting and don't know yet what to do with. The new room was on a corner. Better sight lines. Marcus knew this without thinking about it, and then thought about the fact that he still thought this way, after all the years of deliberate effort to be simply a man who delivered food and went home to his daughter. Old habits did not leave. They went quiet. They waited. He set the bag down inside the door. The woman was already at the window, checking the street below, the exits, the geometry of the block. Marcus watched her do it and recognized it completely. "Army?" he asked. She turned. "No." A pause. "Private, a long time ago." He nodded, said nothing else. "You?" "Yeah," he said. A long time ago." He left her there. He went back to his shift. He told himself that was the end of it. At 4:15, the room service phone rang. "The cookies are cold now," she said when he picked up. "I didn't eat them. Can I get something else?" "What would you like?" A pause. "Anything that takes a while to eat. I'm not going back to sleep." Marcus put in an order for eggs and toast and orange juice, the kind of breakfast that required construction and took 20 minutes. He brought it up himself. She had the lights on low and the laptop open, angled away from the door now rather than away from the wall. A different threat geometry, recalibrated. And she'd changed into jeans and a gray sweater, and had the look of someone who had abandoned the idea of sleep and was making productive use of the decision. Marcus set up the tray. She sat at the small table by the window and pulled the plate toward her. "Sit down," she said. Marcus looked at her. "You've been on your feet since, what, 8 o'clock?" 10, he said. "Sit down," she said again. Not unkindly. Like a person who was used to being specific about what they wanted and had decided to extend that habit to this. He sat. For a few minutes she ate, and he sat, and the room was quiet. In the way rooms are quiet at 4 in the morning when the city is doing its nighttime work outside, and neither person feels the pressure to fill the silence with anything unnecessary. Marcus had always been comfortable in silence. It was one of the things Rosie had inherited from him, which her teachers sometimes flagged in parent-teacher conferences as a quality worth monitoring, and which Marcus privately considered one of the better things he'd given her. "You have a kid," the woman said. It wasn't a question. Marcus looked at her. "How do you know that?" She gestured toward his left forearm, where his sleeve had pulled back slightly. There was a small scar there, shaped like nothing in particular, and beside it a faded ink drawing. A small flower, slightly lopsided, in the specific style of a child's hand. He'd had it tattooed 4 years ago. Rosie had drawn it for him when she was 3, on a piece of paper he'd kept on his desk until it disintegrated, and he decided that something worth keeping that carefully was worth keeping more permanently. "I ain't one," he said. "A daughter, she's 7. What's her name?" "Rosie." She ate another bite of toast. "Her mother?" "Not in the picture," Marcus said. He said it the way he always said it, factual, without weight, because the weight was his business and nobody else's. The woman nodded. She didn't offer condolences, which Marcus appreciated. He had never needed condolences for the life he was living. He needed rest occasionally, and a working toaster, and for the building's elevator to be fixed before winter. "You noticed the phone," she said. Marcus waited. "The one on the table. Most people wouldn't have." "I wasn't looking for it," he said. "It was just there." "But you knew what it meant." "I knew something was wrong," he said. "What it meant specifically, that's yours." She looked at him. She had very direct eyes. She's the kind that didn't move away from a thing once they decided to look at it. "His name is Holt. He was my head of personal security for 4 years." She said it the way you'd give someone information relevant to a shared problem. No performance, no drama, just the fact. "He was the only person outside my office who knew this hotel, this floor, the booking name. He sold the location," Marcus said. "Yes." "To the man who came up." "To the man who sent the man who came up," she said. "There's a difference." She looked at the window. "The man who came up is an instrument. Holt sold the location to the person who wanted to know where I was. That person does not come himself." Marcus said nothing. He was listening in the way he'd been trained to listen, not just to what was being said, but to the shape of it, the edges, what was being placed precisely and what was being left deliberately general. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said. "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm telling you because you're the only person in this building who did something tonight, and I'd like you to understand what it was." He waited. She set her fork down. "My name is Nadia Voss." Marcus heard it land somewhere in his memory. A name he'd encountered in the way you encountered names that lived in the edges of news you didn't quite follow. Finance, technology, something he'd skimmed in a waiting room or caught in fragments from a radio. "The Voss Group," he said. "My grandfather's company." She said it without particular pride, like a fact about geography. "I've run it for 9 years. We're mid-restructuring, a significant contraction in one division. A pivot I've been building toward for 3 years that a number of people with significant stakes in the old structure would prefer not to happen." She looked at her hands. "One of those people is my COO. His name is Warren Spear. He and Holt go back. I learned that 2 days ago, which is why I left the apartment in the middle of the night with 1 bag and 1 laptop and a hotel booking under a name from my grandmother's side." Marcus was quiet. He was thinking about the corridor, the man in the expensive coat, the particular walk of someone following coordinates. "Spear wants the restructure stopped," Marcus said. "He wants me sufficiently destabilized that I'll either delay it or lose the board votes to push it through." She picked up her coffee. "He doesn't need me gone. He needs me off balance." And a woman fleeing her own apartment in the middle of the night and checking into hotels under false names is, photographically, politically, the kind of thing that suggests someone who is not in control of her situation. Is that what he's after? The photographs. The photographs are leverage. The goal is the board vote. She looked at him. I have 11 days. The room was quiet. Outside, the first pale suggestion of pre-dawn was beginning at the horizon. The sky not yet light, but no longer fully dark. The particular in-between hour that Marcus always thought of as the city thinking about morning. What happens in 11 days? He asked. We either complete the restructure and 3,000 jobs in a division that's been mismanaged for 6 years become stable. Or Warren Spear gets enough votes to table it indefinitely, and the division becomes exactly the liability I've been spending 3 years trying to prevent it from becoming. She said it without raising her voice. Just the geometry of a problem. Which is to say that what happens in 11 days is not about me. Marcus sat with that for a moment. He thought about the text message on the cracked phone. Floor 14 confirmed. 2 hours. He thought about the careful way the booking had been set up. The false name, the single bag, the laptop turned to face the wall. He thought about a woman who ran a company that employed thousands of people and who was, right now, eating eggs and toast in a hotel room at 4 in the morning because the person she'd trusted to protect her had sold her coordinates to the person she'd trusted to run her company. Manya, you need somewhere to work for 11 days, he said. She looked at him. Somewhere not connected to your name or the Voss Group or anything Warren Spear can find. She was quiet. My shift ends at 6, Marcus said. I'll be back at 10 tonight. He stood and collected the tray. Between now and then, if you need anything, ask for me by name. I'll be on the overnight again. He looked at her. And Ms. Voss, change hotels, today. Pay cash at the front desk of somewhere smaller. Somewhere that doesn't know your face. She looked at him for a long moment. You're very calm about this, she said. So are you, he said. Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. The first unguarded thing he'd seen from her since the door opened. I've had practice. So have I, Marcus said. He took the subway home at 6:15 in a gray early morning, the car almost empty, the light coming through the windows pale and flat. He had 17 missed messages on his phone, 14 from the building's group chat, 2 from a parent at Rosie's school about a fundraiser, and 1 from Mrs. Delgado that read simply, Rosie ate all her oatmeal. She's fine. Sleep well. He texted back, Thank you, I'll be home by 7. He sat with his head against the window and watched the city move past. He thought about Nadia Voss and her 11 days and the 3,000 jobs she'd described without flourish. The way you describe a structural fact, not a rhetorical one. He thought about Warren Spear, a name he didn't know and wouldn't have known except that now he did. Even the kind of person who uses another person's security detail to run surveillance on them. He thought about Holt. 4 years. The woman had trusted the man for 4 years, and he had sold her floor number for... What, exactly? Marcus didn't know the figure. He didn't need to. He knew the math of betrayal well enough, from the years when those calculations had been his professional subject. The currency changed. The arithmetic didn't. He got home at 6:50. Rosie was at the kitchen table eating cereal with the focused attention of someone with important morning business. She was wearing the sweater with the cat on it that she had worn 4 days this week, because it was the sweater she loved right now, and the sweater she loved right now was the only sweater she wanted, a position Marcus had not once contested. Dad, she said, and without looking up. Hey, Bug. He hung up his coat. He went to the kitchen and put on the coffee. He stood in the light of their small kitchen, which was exactly the size it was, and no larger, and smelled of cereal and the dish soap Rosie had used, somewhat enthusiastically, to wash her own bowl the night before. Busy night? Rosie asked. Yeah, he said. A little. She considered this. Good busy or bad busy? Marcus poured his coffee. He thought about the corridor on the 14th floor. He thought about standing in the center of it, notepad in hand, not moving. Good busy, he said. He slept 4 hours and woke up at noon to a text from a number he didn't recognize. It read, "I changed hotels. I'm paying attention." NV. Marcus looked at the text for a moment. He typed back, "Good." Then he put the phone down and went to pick up Rosie from school. He did not go back to the Meridian that night. He went 3 nights later for his regular shift and found a message waiting for him at the staff desk. An envelope, no name on the outside, left with the concierge. Inside was a single index card. On it was written a number, a time, and 4 words. "I need your read." He called the number on his break, standing in the service corridor in the particular quiet of 1 a.m. "I know who gave Spear the board votes," Nadia Voss said when she picked up. Her voice had the focused energy of someone who had not been sleeping much but had been working. 2 of the votes were procedural. He'd been building those relationships for 18 months. One of them was my CFO, who I considered a friend, which is information I've had 4 days to process and have largely processed. A pause. And one of them was signed in error by a board member who was presented with a document that was not what she was told it was, which means one of those 4 votes is voidable. Marcus let that settle. "How long to void it?" he asked. "If I can get in front of her and get a signed affidavit to our outside counsel by Friday, 6 days. And what's stopping you? Warren Spear has retained 2 private investigators. I've confirmed they're on me. Any meeting I take, any office I enter. He has it photographed." Her voice was controlled. "He's building a parallel narrative. Aggressive founder, destabilizing the company, erratic behavior under pressure. It plays better if there are photographs." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Where does the board member live?" he asked. "Jersey City, 20 minutes by path." "Does she know a room service attendant?" A pause. "No," Nadia said slowly. "Does Warren Spear?" Another pause. Longer. "No," she said. "He doesn't." Marcus looked at the service corridor wall. The concrete. The functional light. The architecture of a building's invisible interior, which he knew better than most people knew their own living rooms. "Tell me what you need," he said. What happened in the next 6 days was not simple. But it was, in the way that most things done carefully by people who know what they're doing are effective. Marcus Cole did not attend a board meeting. He did not speak to a lawyer. He did not do anything that appeared, from any angle, significant. What he did was this. He drove a nondescript car to Jersey City on a Thursday afternoon, wearing civilian clothes, carrying a coffee and a document sleeve that contained a printed summary Nadia had prepared. Not the full affidavit, but the specific technical paragraphs that explained, in plain language, what the board member had actually signed versus what she had been told she was signing. He sat in the living room of Dr. Irene Holloway, who was 64 and had served on the Voss Group board for 7 years, and who had, 4 days ago, been presented with what she was told was a routine governance form and had signed it between 2 other documents at the end of a long meeting. He explained, quietly and without drama, what the document actually was. Dr. Holloway read the summary. She read it again. She looked at Marcus across the coffee table with the expression of a woman arriving at a very clear conclusion. "Who sent you?" she asked. "Someone who wasn't able to come herself?" he said. "Why not?" He looked at her steadily. "Because the people who needed this not to happen have been watching her every move for 10 days, and they don't know mine." Irene Holloway was quiet for a long moment. "I need to speak to outside counsel," she said. "I know," Marcus said. "Ms. Voss is available at this number." He put a card on the table. "This is a secure line. They can't trace it back to the hotel." Dr. Holloway looked at the card, then at Marcus. "How do you know her?" she asked. Marcus thought about the 14th floor, the corridor, the cracked phone. "She needed help at 2 in the morning," he said. "And I was there. If this story has found its way to you, Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story from Quiet Kind. Your support is what keeps these stories coming, and there are so many more waiting to be told. The affidavit was signed on Friday morning. Marcus was on his overnight shift when Nadia's text came through at 3:47 a.m. It read, "One vote voided. Council filing by noon. We have enough." Marcus read it standing at the service station on the 14th floor. The same floor, the same service station, the same amber hum of the hotel at night. He typed back, "Good." Then, after a moment, "How many days left?" Her answer came in under a minute. 4. But I think we're all right. Marcus put the phone in his pocket. He looked down the empty corridor. Sorry, at the carpet he'd walked 600 times, at the elevator indicator light blinking its slow and ordinary blink. He thought about 3,000 jobs in a division that someone had spent 3 years trying to stabilize. He thought about a woman who had checked into a hotel under a false name and asked for chocolate chip cookies at 1:47 in the morning, and had not, in the 10 days since, once asked him why he was helping her. She hadn't asked because she already knew. He hadn't done it for a reason she could explain or repay or categorize. He'd done it because the situation needed someone to stay, and he had been there, and staying was simply what he did. What Marcus Cole did not know, what no one in the building knew except the hotel's general manager, Ann, who had received a very quiet phone call from the Voss Group's chief legal officer that afternoon, was that Nadia Voss was not a client of the Meridian Grand. She was, through a holding company 2 levels removed from her name, one of its owners. She had been for 6 years. Nobody on the overnight staff knew this. Nobody in operations knew this. The overnight room service attendant on the 14th floor, the one who had wheeled a cart to room 1408 at 1:52 in the morning and had seen a cracked phone and made a call and stood in a corridor with a notepad, had had absolutely no idea. He'd just done what he did. And in 4 days, when the vote cleared and the board meeting concluded, and Warren Spears' carefully assembled leverage collapsed under the weight of one voided signature and the legal filing that followed it, a number of people who had known exactly what Nadia Voss was worth were about to learn something about a man named Marcus Cole who had not known and had helped anyway. That was the story. That was always the story. The board vote passed on a Tuesday. Marcus learned about it the way he learned about most things that happened in the world above his pay grade. A fragment overheard. One of the morning concierge staff had a financial news alert on her phone, and the headline crossed the screen while she was standing at the desk, and Marcus was dropping off a cart near the service corridor entrance. He caught the words, "Voss Group restructure approved and decisive margin" before the phone went dark, and she moved on to whatever came next. He stood in the service corridor for a moment, then he went back to work. Yet the call came 2 days later, on a Thursday afternoon, while Rosie was doing homework at the kitchen table and Marcus was in the kitchen making the rice and beans he made every Thursday because Thursday was the night he had the time to do it properly. Soaked beans, slow cooked, with the sofrito his mother had taught him when he was 9 years old and which he had never once abbreviated, because some things deserved their full time. The number was the secure line. "It passed," Nadia said. "I know," Marcus said. "I saw the headline." A pause. "I wanted to tell you myself." He stirred the sofrito. "How does it feel?" She was quiet for a moment. He'd noticed she did this. Paused before answers the way people do when they've decided to give you the real one instead of the available one. "Like something that should have been done 3 years ago," she said, "and like something I almost lost. Both at once." Another pause. "Spear is out. The board voted his removal the same day. He'll contest it. His lawyers are already filing. But the affidavit is solid, and the evidence of how he used Holt is documented." "And Holt?" "Terminated, a week ago. The police matter is separate." Her voice was even. "He's made his choices." Marcus thought about the cracked phone on the table in room 1408. The text from H. The casual precision of a man selling someone else's location like a piece of information that cost him nothing, because to him it hadn't. "And the 3,000 jobs?" Marcus asked. "Protected," she said. The word arrived with a weight that told him she had been carrying it for a while and was only now setting it down. "The restructure begins next month. It'll take 18 months to complete, but the people in that division will know by Monday what they're working toward." From the kitchen table, Rosie said, without looking up from her homework, "Dad, what does migrate mean?" "To move from one place to another," Marcus said. "For animals?" "For animals. For people. For data, if you're using it in a technology context." "I'm using it for animals," Rosie said, and wrote something down with the focused certainty of a 7-year-old whose question has been answered to her satisfaction. There was a sound on the phone that Marcus took a moment to identify. It was Nadia Voss, laughing. Not a polished laugh. A real one. Brief and unguarded. The kind that arrives before a person has time to manage it. "Is that Rosie?" she said. "That's Rosie," he said. "She sounds exactly how I thought she would." Marcus looked across the kitchen at his daughter, who was now chewing her pencil and studying her worksheet with the expression of someone engaged in serious intellectual labor. "Yeah," he said. "She usually does." 3 days later, Marcus arrived for his overnight shift and found a note waiting for him at the staff entrance. A hotel envelope, his name on the front in handwriting he didn't know. Inside was a folded card on Meridian Grand letterhead, and beneath the hotel's embossed crest, a single line. "My office. 9 a.m. Friday." GM. The general manager of the Meridian Grand was a man named Gerald Fitch, who had been in hotel management for 30 years, and who had the particular quality of a person who had encountered most of what life offered and had organized it into categories. Marcus had spoken to him perhaps a dozen times in 3 years. He was not the kind of general manager who appeared in service corridors at 2 a.m. He was the kind who existed in a different layer of the building entirely. Marcus knocked on the office door at 9 o'clock Friday morning. Gerald Fitch stood when he came in. That was the first thing. The second thing was that he was not alone. Nadia Voss was standing at the window. She was not in a bathrobe. She was not in the stripped-down traveling version of herself that Marcus had met 12 days ago on the 14th floor. She was in a dark blazer and trousers, her hair back. The particular posture of a person who has reclaimed the armor they'd been forced to set down. She looked like herself. Marcus thought she probably always had. He'd just met her at a moment when the armor was temporarily unavailable. "Marcus," Gerald Fitch said, "please sit down." Marcus sat. He looked at Nadia. She looked back at him without apology or preamble, which was, he was learning, simply how she did things. "I owe you an explanation," she said. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I owe you an explanation," she said again, with the mild firmness of someone who has decided something and is not reopening the question. 12 days ago, you came to a room and brought me food and noticed something no one else noticed and made a call that gave me the time I needed. And you did it without knowing who I was." She looked at him steadily. "I want you to know who I was." Marcus waited. "The holding company that owns a 31% stake in the group that owns this hotel," she said, "is called Latour Capital. It has been in my family for 40 years. I've managed it directly for the last 9. A pause. "I don't flag it publicly because the Voss Group operates across 14 sectors, and I prefer not to have every vendor negotiation complicated by ownership overlap. But I am, in a structural sense, part of what pays your salary." The room was quiet. Marcus looked at the window, then back at her. "You're telling me I didn't know," he said. "I'm telling you you didn't know," she said, "because it matters. What you did. You didn't do it for a stakeholder or a wealthy guest or a person who could do something for you. You did it because it needed doing." She held his gaze. "And I needed you to understand that I understand that." Gerald Fitch cleared his throat. He had the look of a man who had been asked to be present for something and was honoring that request while recognizing it was not, fundamentally, about him. "Mr. Cole," he said, "I've been asked by Ms. Voss to discuss your position here." Marcus looked at him. "What you did 12 nights ago," Fitch said, "was exceptional. Not in a decorative sense. In a literal one. It was outside the scope of your role and entirely within the scope of your judgment, and the outcome was—" He paused. "The outcome was significant." "Gerald," Nadia said, "mine with the gentleness of someone who has been listening to legal language all week and has a limited remaining appetite for it. Let me." Fitch nodded and folded his hands. Nadia looked at Marcus. "The Voss Group has a security and operations intelligence division. It's not the public-facing side of what we do. It's internal. It manages risk across the 14 sectors. It advises on exactly the kind of situation that I found myself in 12 days ago." A pause. "It is, right now, in a significant reconstruction, partly because I have just removed the man who was managing it, and partly because Holt existed, and I intend to understand how he existed for 4 years without my knowing." Marcus said nothing. He was listening the way he listened, completely, without filling the spaces. "I'm not offering you a job," Nadia said. "Yeah, I'm asking whether you would be willing to have a conversation about one. Those are different things." She looked at him. "The conversation would tell you what the role is, what it pays, what it requires of your time and your expertise. You would be able to say no. You would be able to say you need to think about it. You would be able to ask any question you want." A pause. "I'm asking because you are exactly the person I need. Not because you are a good person, though you are. Because you see things, and you act on what you see, and you do not make it about yourself." The morning light came through the window at a low winter angle. Marcus could hear the building's ambient hum, the HVAC, the particular frequency of the Meridian at 9 a.m., quieter than 2 a.m., differently occupied. He thought about Rosie, into the lunch he'd packed that morning. Peanut butter, apple slices, the crackers she liked, and a note he wrote every day on a small card and tucked into the front pocket of her bag. Something small, something true. "You are brave. Love, Dad." He thought about the nights he came home at 6:15 and stood in the kitchen and made coffee while she ate cereal, the specific morning light of their apartment, which was exactly the size it was. He thought about the subway home. He thought about the arithmetic he did every month, what came in and what went out and what remained, which was never quite as much as he needed it to be and never quite as little as he feared. He thought about Rosie asking what migrate meant. For animals. For people. "Tell me about the hours," he said. Nadia almost smiled. "Though better than overnight room service. Tell me about the work." And she did. She talked for 40 minutes. Gerald Fitch excused himself after 10, with the discreet recognition that the conversation had moved past the territory that required him. Marcus asked questions the way he asked questions when something mattered. Specific, direct, without performance. She answered them the same way. The role was real. The need was genuine. The salary was a number Marcus heard and then had to consciously decide not to react to, because reacting to it would have told her something about where he was standing financially, and where he was standing financially was his business. "I need until Monday," he said. "Of course," she said. "I need to think about what it means for Rosie's schedule. What it means for Mrs. Delgado." "Take whatever time you need." He stood. He looked at her across the office, the light from the window, the city outside, 12 days condensed into this room on a Friday morning. "You should know," he said, "that when I walked into room 1408, I was thinking about getting home by 6 to sleep before I picked up my daughter from school. That was the full extent of my calculation." She looked at him. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm asking." He called her Monday morning. Yes, he said when she picked up. A pause. Then, okay. I have two conditions. Tell me. Rosie's school schedule is fixed. Pickup is 3:15 and I'm there. Done. And I need 2 weeks to give proper notice here, as Gerald's been fair to me and I won't leave him short. 3 weeks, she said. Take 3. Do it right. Marcus was standing in the kitchen. Rosie was at school. The apartment was quiet in the way it was quiet during school hours. A particular inhabited silence, the presence of someone who would return. Why 3? He asked. Because you're the kind of person who gives 2 weeks when you mean 1, she said. I want you to do it right. Take 3. He was quiet for a moment. You pay attention, he said. So do you, she said. That's the whole point. Marcus Cole's last overnight shift at the Meridian Grand was on a Thursday. He worked it the same way he had worked every other shift, methodically, without ceremony. He knew the building the way you know a place you're leaving. Which is to say, he noticed it more than usual. The specific weight of the service corridor, the elevator's hesitation, the carpet smell, the amber light of the lobby at 4 a.m. At the end of the shift, Darnell Briggs found him at the service station. Heard you're leaving, Darnell said. End of today, Marcus said. Darnell nodded. He was 23 and not yet jaded, and Marcus thought, not for the first time, that there was something genuinely worthwhile about a young man who paid attention. What you did that night, Darnell said. On 14, I looked into it afterward. The woman, who she was. Yeah, Marcus said. You knew? I knew something was wrong, Marcus said. I didn't know anything else until later? Darnell thought about this. Does it change it? Knowing now? Marcus looked at the service corridor wall. No, he said. It doesn't change what happened on 14. Those are separate things. Darnell nodded slowly, filing something. The guy who showed up, they find out who sent him? That's being handled, Marcus said. You involved in that? Marcus picked up his coat. Not anymore, he said. Someone better than me is. He walked out of the Meridian Grand at 6:20 on a gray January morning. The city cold and beginning its day in the way the city always began its day. Without fanfare, without acknowledgement of any individual life within it, simply moving forward, because that was what cities did. He took the subway home. He picked up Rosie at 3:15. She came through the school doors at a run, the way she always did, backpack bouncing, and grabbed his hand with both of hers. And they walked the 4 blocks home through the cold, and she told him about a project on migratory birds and a disagreement she'd had with her friend Callie about which bird flew the farthest. Which was the Arctic tern, but Callie had said it was geese, and Rosie had looked it up and been correct. A fact she related without excessive triumph, but with the quiet satisfaction of a person whose research has been vindicated. Dad, she said, as they turned onto their block. Yeah. Are you going to a new job? Yeah, starting in 2 weeks. She thought about this. Is it good? Marcus looked at the street ahead. At the specific ordinary shape of their block, the bodega on the corner and the dry cleaner and the building with the yellow awning. I think so, he said. Yeah. Rosie considered this with the seriousness it deserved. Will you still be home for dinner? Most nights, he said, and always by pickup. She squeezed his hand. Okay. The full weight of her assessment, delivered in a single word, in the way of someone who had decided the information was sufficient. They went upstairs. Marcus made dinner. Rosie did her homework at the kitchen table, and the apartment held its particular evening warmth. The smell of whatever was on the stove, the soft sound of pencil on paper, the radiator doing its steady work against the January cold outside. At 7 o'clock, his phone buzzed. A text from Nadia. The division director confirmed today. The restructure begins Monday. 3,100 people. He typed back, "Good." Then after a moment, "Rosie says the Arctic tern is the bird that migrates farthest." She looked it up. The response took a minute. She's right, and it flies from the Arctic to the Antarctic and back, roughly 44,000 miles per year. And then, tell her she's right. Marcus looked at his daughter across the kitchen table, at the careful handwriting and the chewed pencil and the sweater with the cat on it that she had worn every available day this week. "Hey, Bug. Yeah, you were right about the Arctic tern. It's 44,000 miles." Rosie looked up. A brief, complete satisfaction moved across her face. "I knew it," she said, and went back to her homework. There is a version of this story that people tell with the reveal at the center. The moment Marcus Cole learned that the woman in the hotel bathrobe was a billionaire, that the hotel he worked in was partially hers, not that the small decision he'd made in a corridor at 2:30 in the morning had been witnessed by someone with the specific power to change the shape of his life. But that version misses the point. It has always missed the point. The point is not that Marcus Cole was seen by someone powerful. The point is that he was exactly the same person before the seeing as after. That when he stood in that corridor with a notepad, he was not making a calculation. He was simply being who he was, which was a man who noticed what needed noticing and did what needed doing, and then went home on the subway and picked up his daughter at 3:15. That did not change when he learned who she was. It never changed. And Nadia Voss, who had spent 9 years in rooms full of people who knew exactly what she was worth and treated her accordingly, understood what she had found in a 14th floor corridor on a January night at 2:30 in the morning. She understood it precisely. It was the rarest thing she had encountered in a very long career of encountering things. A person who was simply himself. She had not been looking for that. She had been looking for chocolate chip cookies and a way to survive 11 days. But she was a woman who paid attention. And what she had found, she intended to keep. Marcus Cole started his new role on a Monday in February. The office was in Midtown. The hours were what she'd promised. He was home by 3:15. He still made the sofrito from scratch on Thursday nights. Rosie was still right about most things she looked up. And on a Saturday morning in early March, when the city was beginning its reluctant turn toward spring, and Rosie was at a friend's house and Marcus was making coffee in the apartment that was exactly the size it was, his phone buzzed with a text from a number that was no longer the secure line, but simply her number, saved under her name. It read, "I'm in your neighborhood. Is the coffee worth anything, or should I bring some?" Marcus looked at the coffee in his hand. He looked at the window, the pale March light, the bodega on the corner. He typed back, "Bring yours. Mine is fine, but yours is probably better." 3 dots. Then, "Honest. I'll be there in 10. He put his phone down. He looked at the kitchen, the table, the 2 chairs, at the refrigerator covered in Rosie's drawings held with the good magnets, the sofrito he'd been reaching for. The morning that was, until a moment ago, a quiet one. He got out a second mug. That was all. That was everything. He got out a second mug, and the morning continued, and outside the window the city went about its March business, indifferent, as it had always been, to the specific small warmth of this particular kitchen, where a man who had stood in a corridor at 2:30 in the morning and chosen not to walk away was standing now at his own stove, waiting for the sound of the door. Thank you for sitting with this story all the way to the end. The people who stay for the whole story are the ones who understand it. If it moved you, the videos on your screen right now are waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come home. Quiet Kind has a story for you.